Come on down, take your picture, and then we can get started. Look at that beautiful background.
Oh, that's
Très bien, très bien. Oh yeah, shaking hands. Oh, look at that background. That's marvelous. Well done. Okay, let's wrap this. This photo, I will make certain you all have the digital version. You will have it all. I will make certain you have it. Give me a few days to get that photo to you, though. We're kind of got some things to do. So let's back up to, I have just 4 slides. So we have a list. I do this. I make a to-do list. So session co-hosts, you have a list of things to do. I already emailed this to you, so you know. I want to know, is the hypothesis correct, or should it be deleted, edited, changed? That's step 1. Do you have an answer to the hypothesis? If not, what are the tests? This is in bold. What are the actions that your session wants to take? What are the actions you want to do? I want actionable things. That's the most important thing for the sessions. Don't worry about wording it perfectly. We'll get to that. And then make certain that your lead authors in your session, and anyone else, but certainly the lead authors in your session, make certain that you share a document with them. I want that document in 1 month. So each session will give me a document, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages, not 20, but some pages, and you will tell me these things from your session. Then we'll summarize that, and we'll publish probably an EOS paper on that. That's the beginning of publication. All right, so all session hosts, is this okay? Any questions? It's good? Okay, good. And I will probably email you a reminder next week. You will hear from me. You cannot run. Now, AGU has made available a web page for us. It's a standard web page, and if you have a poster, I will send you a link, probably next week, maybe even this weekend, where you can upload your poster so that it will be on an AGU web page, and you will have an opportunity then for your poster to be citable. It's not peer-reviewed, but it'll still be something that you can cite as an official citation. In other words, it'll have one of these DOI identifiers. That's very important for citation. I'll email you a link where you can upload all that. I will check with AGU all the PowerPoint slides. I would think it would be wonderful if all the presentations we've given could also be uploaded to a uniform location, preferably this location. We'll find something, and if you want to upload your PowerPoint slide, wonderful. Remember, all of the talks will be on YouTube. Guy Schumann is making certain that happens. And so if you said you didn't want your talk on YouTube, that's okay. You don't have to, but everyone else will have you on YouTube soon, and it'll be shared with the world. I want everyone who could not be here to be able to watch and participate in our conference. There will be at least one, if not more than one, EOS articles. EOS is the general publication, news publication of AGU. I think there's been a couple of amazing things happen out of here, not just our science. And so the summaries that the 6 sessions will provide to me, will write an EOS article on that. But there's something else going on here that we all know. This is really unique. And I was talking with Guy last night, and he suggested this, and I think it's a brilliant idea. An EOS article just on how we all got together. And many of you mentioned this, and we all know this. So thank you for coming. And this is truly a unique conference. And I think EOS would appreciate hearing just what was that. So I think 2 EOS articles. This is the big thing. Organize your manuscripts, organize your research. We are going to get peer-reviewed publications out of this. I'll talk more about that in just a second, but we are definitely planning to publish the things that you saw. And it'll be published, because it's an AGU Chapman conference, our publications will be AGU publications. This final thing I'll return to in a moment. So any questions about this? Are we okay? Keep moving. This is pretty typical. This is just what we promised. Okay, now, this is the what's next. I have to measure. I have to have outcomes. As the Chapman chair of this conference, and as the Chapman chair, as Venkat pointed out, I'm also the chair of the Chapman conferences in general for AGU. AGU asks of us to have measurable outcomes. And this is a very good thing. We want to have something purposeful, more than just, oh, I had a good time, which is wonderful to have a good time. But what are the measurements of success? How do we measure that? Well, there's an individual-based success. Email me. I really am serious about this. Send me an email soon. Did you make a new collaboration? Did you meet somebody here and you're now planning to do work together? I want to hear that. You don't have to tell me what you're doing, but just the 2 of us, 3 of us, 10 of us, we're going to make a new collaboration. Send me an email saying that's what we've decided to do. Did you have a new idea? Solving a problem. Tell me that. Yes, I had a new idea and I think I can solve this problem. Again, you don't have to give me all the details, just that something I can summarize and give to AGU. Other successes, anything that was a success here. In other words, what is the result of this meeting for you personally that only happened because that only happened because you came here, and this result would not have happened otherwise? In other words, you had to come here in order to have that success. That's what I want to hear about. Just send me an email about that. Again, it doesn't have to be great detail, but I just want to be able to tally all these emails that I hope I'll get, and I want to be able to sum them up and tell AGU on an individual level, we had great success. Is that okay? Can everyone? I'm getting some good head nods. Yes, good. D'accord. Final slide. This is the one we need to talk a little bit about. How do we measure success as a community, as a group of us? Well, definitely the more peer-reviewed Congo publications, the better. That's a measure of the community. If only one person is publishing papers on the Congo, that's not a community. We need many papers coming out of this conference. They can be published by individuals, by research teams, etc., but they sum together to be a community of us. So they will be submitted to AGU journals. Now, I have to work with the program committee. There's a dozen people on the program committee of this Chapman, and we have to make a decision. Will we publish our papers as collections in individual AGU journals? So Water Resources Research, JGR Atmospheres, Global Biogeochemical Cycles, and so on are individual journals. You could submit to your particular journal. If you're a hydrologist, you might submit to WRR. If you're studying carbon, you might submit to GBC, etc. And then those editors, it would go through the usual rigor of AGU review, and then once it's published, AGU then would provide a common link to all papers and collect them together, but in a web page format. That's one end member. The other end member of publication is a traditional approach from meetings like this, which is to produce a monograph. That's a different style of publication. I have gone back and forth over the past couple of weeks on what I think is the right answer. And I would be glad to know what you think about this. I think we can have, I'm not concerned so much about having a conversation here about that, but email me what you think is the right approach here. I can see a number of options, but we will do what's best for our community. Gilles Mahi has mentioned future meetings. I think it's important to know that there will be future meetings. Gilles, do you want to say 2 words about some of these future meetings you've been thinking about? I think this is important to hear what's coming next, what's already planned. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. For future meetings, I showed you a slide for the Cotonou meeting in 2020, which will be the 4th International Conference on the Hydrology of Large African River Basins. It's basically a UNESCO friend program meeting coupled with AHS, and it will be so you will receive the further informations. It will be in Cotonou. The first one was in Hammamet, Tunisia, then Dakar, then Algiers. Now it's back in Black Africa, and I would like the fifth one to be on the Congo River. So we began to discuss this with colleagues. It might be as soon as 2021. We might, because not to be too far from our AGU, so it might be in 3 years, 3 years from now. But we can begin to work together to think about this next meeting on the Congo Basin for 2021.
Thank you, thank you. So there are plans. We are going to have more meetings. Where I'm going to have conversations on the 3 blue points. So I think we do need to have some web page somewhere that's a central point of reference to all the other data sets that are out there. Gilles has been running a ResearchGate web page. We have a WordPress web page for this Chapman. We need to have some central point to where, at least from the beginning, we can all go to there and say, oh, I can click on that link and find some rainfall data. We can wonder about its authenticity, its provenance, and so on, but at least it's a starting point. We'll come to that in a moment. I think this is important. I think fellowships for everyone from sub-Saharan Africa would be wonderful. Fellowships that can be made available on a competitive basis, which means I think AGU should issue these fellowships. They can be non-biased in awarding fellowships. They can be awarded on merit. But finding the funding for fellowships is a little bit of a challenge. It's not enormous sums of money, but it's an important amount of money. But I think we can perhaps do things like this, fellowships that can continue our research dialogue with each other. I think those are important steps. So that's on the agenda. But these are the 3 I want to think about. So there's 6 different sessions, and there's groups from those sessions. I think you should be working together. I think you should have found collaborations here. I think there should have been opportunities there, and share the data. It's very important to share the data. We know that we're passionate about our data, and it's important to also share that and to be fair and honest with us. So this is important. Can we establish field stations, 1 or more? Can that be a next big push for us? Field stations operating in the Congo. And they wouldn't be just singular in terms of the science. They wouldn't just measure discharge, but they can measure a number of things important to all of the sessions. I think we can do this. This is one I'm particularly interested in, an airborne campaign. Flying an airplane multiple times over places in the Congo. So the last session I had to meet with NSF and NASA in the hallway and had a conversation with them, and they were kind and encouraging to take the next step. Of course they didn't say there's money for this, go forward. But what I heard was, try. Let's see what you come up with. They are interested. And that's very powerful. That's where it starts. They said to me, no, field stations are too hard, despite the fact that Greta has already been in the Cuvette Centrale on a field station she created. No, they're not. They can be done. So there's ears listening saying, tell us more. Airborne campaign. It's possible. It's something we can target as an opportunity to think about. So I think these become wonderful things. There are models, though, of success who have come before us. And by this, I don't mean just in terms of science. I mean in terms of how these campaigns, airborne campaigns, field stations, how they work with agencies in other locations. The classic example in the Amazon is LBA. That was an airborne campaign that included field work and so on, and it was a wonderful success. Not just airborne. No, it involved field stations. It probably was also the space shuttle, too, was probably involved in that one. But it was multifaceted and multi-agencies And it was put together by a steering committee that started this. And Jeff, of course, knows more about the history than I do. But it is, what the important point is, our funding agencies here in the US and elsewhere understand that model. And so we could use that same model, but for the Congo. And that's my thought. So we heard today about CARPE that Matt Hansen has worked on. It is a model of success in sub-Saharan Africa. In other words, let's use these successes that come before us in order to do what we are interested in the Congo. So now let's open this up. And of course, I think they need to be multi-science and multi-nation. I think that goes without saying. That's what I think. But what do you think about these ideas? And to start us off, I think I'll ask Delwyn to say just a couple of words about what is possible with an airborne campaign. Can you say just a few words at the mic?
So gosh, you already mentioned the LBA, which is, I think, probably for this one of the most relevant large-scale deployments that I was privileged as a new graduate student to go on and just launch weather balloons, actually. But they had ground radar, they had airborne radar, they integrated that with satellite observations, and it was put together, actually, through steering committee kind of thing. So it is multi-science, multinational. And I think what you could do in the Congo, and I'd like to hear more about, I've heard a little bit about what is missing or what would be helpful. There's a lot of airborne assets and also ground assets that can be staged, deployed from a multitude of sources. And so it really needs to go down from, you know, kind of a comprehensive multi-science, where are the missing observations that can really answer some of these science questions? Then we can look at the tools in the toolkit. And there's a lot of assets at ESA, there's a lot of assets at NASA, there's even off-the-shelf sensors that you can put on. You can load up a plane with, you know, a dozen different instruments if it's a big enough plane. So what do we really need to get at, and what is the combination and the synergy of observations? If we fly all of these things at the same time with these resolutions, what can we do? Some of the things I've heard about that I think we can get at are, you know, inundation dynamics underneath the canopy. There's ways to get at that. And then precipitation and the resolution of precipitation. There seems to be a lot of questions around that. So there's instrumentation we can deploy that will be better than what we're getting from satellites currently and help us understand the satellite measurements better. So those are just a couple of things off the top of my head that I can think of. And also the education that comes along with something like this in the country. When you get all of these people together, it's kind of like taking what we have here, but at a whole different scale. So this could be really fun and really cool.
Please feel free to provide comment. Just come up to the mic. Go ahead, just go to the mic. Thanks, Richard. I better stand over here.
Just to add to the story of what the aircraft might be able to do from the land surface perspective, we had a great success with aircraft in the Central Sahara in the Fennec campaign. It was a joint campaign that involved the UK, France and Germany. I ran the UK component of that, and we flew the instrumented BAE-146 over the Sahara for about 200 hours. In many ways, it resembled the Congo in the sense that it was a spot on the map for which there's very little data, but crucially, very little understanding of the processes that should be there when you begin to look in the numerical model products. So from the perspective of climate, an airborne campaign in the Congo Basin could retrieve things that we can't get near at the moment, like the structure of the mesoscale convective complexes, which are shown in several talks to be an important control on the amount of rainfall. So flying near or over the top or underneath some of those systems would be able to retrieve the dynamics of what those magical things are doing in the case of the Congo. And we just won't get that data. The value of an aircraft is that you can chase those systems and go to where they are. You don't have to second guess where they might be in terms of balloon releases and so on, although having ground-based instrumentation is very helpful. What we found in the case of the Saharan campaign in Fennec was that there was a great leap forward in understanding the processes. that would have, you know, it wouldn't have happened for 10, 20 years if we'd not done those 200 hours of flying.
Yeah, you can go ahead, Jeff, if you want to. I hope you can even comment a little on the early days of LBA and how we can learn from that.
Perfect. It's really nice to have a straight man at the audience, because that's precisely what I was going to do. Let me just say a couple words about the LBA and how I think it's highly relevant to the discussion here. I was part of the steering committee, so I've been around for a long time on it.
I just heard a volunteer.
Wait, the connection's bad. Anyway, so basically the very brief history of all that came about. There were a number of individual researchers who worked on different parts of the Amazon: hydrology, biodiversity, distribution of frogs, all that kind of stuff, climatology, and so forth. Then time went on a bit, and there were actually two aircraft campaigns in the mid-1980s called ABLE, the Amazon Boundary Layer Experiment, which had a wet season component and then coming back in the dry season. So we can see that's highly relevant here. And so a community started to be developed out of all that. So by then, given that was very successful with a whole lot of work by a lot of people, then the discussion came about doing an LBA thing. It started off as the L, which stood for lambada, which is a kind of Brazilian dance, but it stood for large-scale atmosphere or something, was the official acronym. And then so that was to be large-scale aircraft sort of stuff. Another group came around that wanted to do more micro-meteorology. And so that different crowd, and that became, the nickname then was baterista, which is the music you play to do the dancing of the lambada. Then NASA Terrestrial Ecology got involved and said, okay, there are a bunch of ecology issues. And the nickname for that was Ambiace, and pretty soon that acronym became impossible. And so we had to make up something to actually be LBA, so that wasn't the original at all. That said, so we started off with meetings in São José dos Campos, Brazil, and Washington, D.C., and so forth, sketching out what are all the different elements of excitement was here. And so basically, there were two simple questions that drove the entire experiment. One is, how does the Amazon function as an entity? And then two, how would deforestation change that functioning? It was not just aircraft, but a tremendous amount of work on the ground, a number of eddy covariance towers. The whole carbon is at the Amazon a source or sink kind of stuff got really quite complicated around the covariance tower arguments. There were several of us out driving riverboats around. Lots of physiology. Then the whole discussion came, how do we inform the general population of what the results are? Then a hugely important part was the finding and the training of Brazilian graduate students. So I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like 1,000 theses came out of the whole project. And so it was tremendously successful on the educação treinamento side of it. So that was built in from the beginning. So personally, I think that this whole LBA thing, and by the way, there was quite a lot of money involved. It was the European, I forgot to mention this, the Brazilian Space Agency, INPE, were the leaders. NASA was a major player, obviously, and the European Union. So it really covered kind of everything we've talked about in this room. So if you're not an aircraft person, don't worry. There's lots of integral part of the various aspects of the ground stuff. So I think there's a lot of good lessons that could be learned from how the whole LBA experience was developed from the grassroots, how communities were developed, how the information systems were developed. And we're much more sophisticated as a global community now than we were then in terms of cooperations, the sensors, a lot of the kinds of stuff that had to be done the hard way could be done by all the advances in technology that are happening today.
Yeah, this is a really wonderful history. So we'll do a couple more comments, but we do have to leave because we have to vacate the building. So go ahead, Sharon.
One of the other experiments that I think could be a good model was the Hapex-Sahel experiment. And the way this came about is that the original science question was, is the Sahel drought caused by land surface processes? The practical question was, how can we apply satellites to studying this? Now, that grew into a multinational project that lasted about 10 years that you would call in English ISLSCIP, in French ISLSCP, for International Satellite Land Surface Climatology Project. But we tested things first in the Great Plains of the US because the question was, can we do all this in the Sahel? And so everything was kind of perfected in the Great Plains. Then we moved to the Sahel, and just to give you an idea, and it was plains, it was hydrologist, it was ecologist, it was meteorologist. But just to give you an idea of the success, if you were to go into journals and Google terms related to land surface processes, prior to HAPEX Sahel, there was always almost nothing. You take a look at the number and it just linearly increased, and it's increasing more and more constantly. Given the fact that it was in Africa and there's a lot of political constraints that we had to deal with here that you might not have had to have dealt with LBA, I think that's also something that we should think of in terms of the model.
Go ahead, Andreas. Come. We'll do just one or two more comments because thank you.
I was involved in the AMA project in West Africa. Recently, we had a big airborne campaign in southern West Africa called Dakiva. So it is possible to fly, and except Nigeria, by the way. We couldn't get permission to fly over Nigeria. But you need, of course, these long-term field stations too, multidisciplinary measurements at the field stations. And I want to make one scientific remark. When you talk about airborne campaign, I have never heard in the sessions I attended the point aerosols, biomass burning and aerosols. So I recently flew in a commercial aircraft over Gabon, and it's so dusty from these biomass burning. I think this is an important issue also for satellite people here, but also for climate. And finally, one remark to your data reference point. In AMA, we set up a database. It's now called Baobab, and it hosts all the AMA data. It hosts all the Dakiva data. It hosts other campaign data, and it's so important that all the people that go in the field have their project. When the project ends, that it's hosted somewhere centrally, also by people who know a little bit about the subject, and that can stand for decades. I have to say, Thor, that hosting the AMA database in Niger failed. So there is no mirror database anymore. So it is in France at the moment. But you need to think about sort of a central database. Nowadays you can give the data to Pangea or other, but it's better to have it centrally. And in Dakiva we decided now to have the so-called CCBY model. So this is a license, you can use the data. Yeah? And I think it's very important to push the people to put their data on such a commonly managed database, which needs funding.
Go ahead, Gilles. Go ahead.
As a scientist, I'm very happy to know that there has been so many successful experiments over Africa. As a researcher involved in cooperation since more than 30 years, I'm also very concerned by how our colleagues can participate more, be more involved, and capitalize for all these research results. I showed you a map of the NEPAD research centers of excellence that are absolutely known over Central Africa. This should make us think about how we can involve more colleagues in our future research experiments so that they can capitalize for themselves and their colleagues in their countries. So the first thing would be to search for a network of solid laboratories and research centers in those countries that could be associated at high level, and prioritize the capacity building towards those centers, and to have further pillars for us to continue to work, and for them to better assimilate the post-experiment issues, as we can hear that, for instance, the AMA database is difficult to access because there is no dedicated service in Africa doing it itself. we're working on Africa, it must be also for African and with Africans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Multi-nation is a requirement here. Any other comments? I don't want to close it off, but we are at the end, aren't we? Okay, so you see the direction that we will be going. Some of the things are well defined in terms of the future steps. You need to, where does it say there? I need this from the session hosts. You have a thing to do in 1 month. We'll get some EOS articles. The AGU poster, by the way, will be, I submitted an abstract, just a general abstract on our Chapman, and it'll be in Charles' session. He's run a wonderful session on Africa for several years. Some of you have even given talks in that session. So that's happening. There'll be these EOS articles. You will be submitting your papers. I'll give you some guidance on how we'll handle that. That's coming up. You need to email me. Okay, I want to hear from you. This is very important. Don't worry about my inbox. I can handle it. I handled it so far. But this is the future right here. These are some big things that will happen, and they will take time. The things in blue will take time, and so we'll get to work on that. So without further ado, thank you for coming. Thank you so much. And AGU has a gift for you out front, so get some chocolate.